Do you wish that you could get names during a reading? Do you ever wonder if there's something that you have to practice or learn to be able to do it? In today's video, I'll be sharing 4 ways you can practice getting names, how I share names when I get them, and what's usually going on when you were getting names during a reading and then you stop getting them. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell too if you want to be notified the next time that I release a new video about all things mediumship. I release meditations, how-tos, video recordings of my readings so you can see me in action, tips about how to make a living as a medium, and so much more. A quick note before we dive into names. Names will not make or break a reading. Yes, they are sexy, but what sitters really want is to feel like they're getting borrowed time with their past loved one. That usually comes down to really powerful evidence that the medium is bringing through that has to do with the spirit's character and personality when they were here, details about the relationship that they had with the sitter, shared memories, etc. That being said, yes, it's super fun and totally amazing to get names. So let's talk about how you might start bringing them through more often in your mediumship readings. Number 1. Let spirit know that you're passionate about bringing through names and ask for their support. Another way of saying this is set the intention. Now, in a lot of my videos, I talk about the power of intention, and I'm going to talk about it again. I set intentions with spirit. I will say something in my mind or out loud. Spirit, I'd really like to bring through names in this reading. Please help me to do that. And I'm open to different ways for you to bring a name through for me. Number 2, you can hear names clairaudiently. Now, not everybody feels like clairaudience is a strength of theirs, but it doesn't mean that you can't heighten your ability to hear spirit clairaudiently. You can practice clairaudience by listening to sounds when you're out on a hike, just the subtle sounds of nature, or listening to quiet sounds beyond your usual day-to-day sounds in a home where everything's quiet. You can pay attention to the sounds of people's voices when they're singing, when they're speaking, the timbre of their voice, the quality of their voice. You can listen to music, and if there's a whole symphony playing or a whole band playing together, many instruments, isolate one instrument and just listen for that one. These are all examples of exercises that help you to heighten your clairaudience, because the number one way that I get names is by hearing them. The more that I've worked on my clairaudience by practicing the exercises I just shared with you, the easier it has been for me to hear the names of spirit. Or I might even sit in meditation and listen for names in my thoughts voice. Or I might say to spirit, whisper some names to me in my ear so I start to understand what it sounds like when I receive a name clairaudiently. If you are to sit in meditation or sit in the power and then ask to hear some names, you could say, give me a girl's name from my grandmother's generation. Whisper a name that I've never heard before or I haven't heard recently. These are ways that you can practice receiving a name from spirit. Number 3, you can get names clairvoyantly. So it's not always about hearing the name. Sometimes people who are clairvoyant will actually see a name spelled out in their mind's eye. And so you might see Mary spelled out in front of you rather than hearing it. Another way that spirit can work clairvoyantly to give you a name is to show you someone who has the same name. A lot of the time, I might see my grandfather come through and not exactly know why, or see his face, or I might even hear the sound of his name, John, and then I know that I am talking with a spirit who has the same name. So it's not just that you hear them, you might also see them in these different ways. Ask spirit to show you people who have a certain name, to have that be one more way that they can communicate things. So if someone's coming through and their name is Mark, show me my neighbor whose name is Mark. If someone's coming through and their name is Jenny, show me my friend Jenny. These are different ways you can ask spirit to help you with clairvoyantly getting a name. The other thing you can do is you can print out lists of names. So if you're getting familiar with a list of names that you're reading, it may be easier for you to see that name spelled out in your mind's eye during a reading. The 4th way that I've really enjoyed getting names is when evidence is combined and clear senses are combined. So I'll tell you a story about a reading I had one time where I brought through a grandmother figure for my sitter, and that grandmother figure spoke about a dog that was very, very close to her who would sit on her lap. I didn't know that she was trying to tell me the dog's name, and I didn't actually get the name during the reading. It was one of my really early on readings. But what I saw clairvoyantly was the letter M right in my mind's eye. And then I also saw our local hardware store called Jax, spelled J-A-X. And I thought that was really strange. M plus Jax. And I didn't figure out why it was. I asked my sitter, she's showing me a local hardware store and it feels like she's trying to communicate something, but I just want to make sure there's no significance about our local hardware store. And the sitter was like, not that I can think of. But afterward, the sitter told me that the dog's name was Max. So I was shown the M and then I was shown Jax. And so I thought it was a really clever and creative way of spirit trying to get me to say this dog's name, even though I didn't figure it out at that point. It was a really powerful learning lesson for me that spirit really does work off our frame of reference, and they will blend different clairs or different pieces of evidence to give you a clue about what they're trying to say. Sometimes spirit will even surprise you and you will feel compelled to say certain words and you don't know why. I remember bringing through the father of some daughters during a reading, and I was talking about how he was a really social person and he was really chatty, and I said, this guy was not a silent Sal. Everyone on the Zoom video just gasped. Our dad's name was Sal. All of a sudden, I saw an image of the country and I heard El Salvador. And I said, was his name Salvador? And they said, Salvatore, but very close. That name never would have come to me. So it was like I was compelled to say Silent Sal just for the sake of what I thought was alliteration. And shortly after, I said, he's saying the name Terry. And it turns out his wife was off screen, not wanting to be seen. So there's so many different ways that names can come across. And one of the most important things with all of this is to make sure that you are not desperately reaching for the name, because that's when it becomes more elusive. A question for you. If you get names, how does spirit share them with you? Please comment below. This can give other people ideas of how they can start getting names more easily. But if you haven't had names yet, what will you practice that's been most helpful so far? And remember, with each of these ways, you can even say to spirit, I'd like to get names. Feel free to combine evidence, to combine clairs. Feel free to give them to me clairvoyantly, clairaudiently, or in any way that makes sense to me. How I share names when I'm giving a reading. Sometimes spirit drops in a name so clearly, and I just say it and that's the name. Other times it's not quite as clear, and I will share a few different variations of a name. I had a reading the other week, and I heard Katie, Kathy, Catherine, and the sitter said Kathy was her name. Then I started hearing cat, 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 cat over again, and I said, she's saying that you shortened her name, cat, cat, and he said it was Kath. And so sometimes I'll hear a variation of what the name is, and so I'll share those different variations. I also remember the time I was bringing through a spirit who had been a man when he was living, but I kept hearing this name that sounded like Bernice, Bernice. I couldn't quite figure it out, and I said, perhaps this is the name of a woman who was close to him or a family member. And my sitter said, no, but I know exactly why you're saying that. It turns out that the spirit's name was Bernie, but Bernie was really not in my frame of reference. And so what I heard was Bernice. So if it's not coming in crystal clear, don't worry. Share the variations that you are hearing. And sometimes that will give a lot more clarity to your sitter. When it drops in really clearly right away, this is always a beautiful moment. The first name I ever heard was Gary. I'll never forget it. It was a very heavy reading, and I was bringing through a gentleman who had been a grandfather to the sitter, and he had made all kinds of apologies, and then I just heard it as clearly as someone shouting my name, Gary. I didn't have to bring through any variations. I just knew. This may happen for you sometimes where you weren't thinking about a name at all, and all of a sudden it just drops in as if it came from nowhere. And this is the best way to receive spiritual impressions because you know they're not of you. But that doesn't always happen. Other times you will say it and you won't even know. So this goes back to my example of saying this guy wasn't a silent Sal and didn't even know that I felt compelled by spirit to share things in a certain way that I wouldn't usually share them. When names are coming through, but they're fuzzy, or you feel as if your mind is kind of desperately searching for a name, I will wait until I feel that that name has been brought through a handful of times before I will say it, because I don't want to confuse my sitter by sharing a name that I suspect may be a lot of mind chatter. Sometimes when we're really fixated on wanting to get more names, we move into a place of desperation about it. And I talk to my clients a lot about reaching energy versus receptive energy. Remember, as mediums, we're working with energy, and our energy needs to be at a high vibration. It needs to be receptive in order for us to allow spirit to speak through us. But the moment that we start grasping and reaching for things is when we get into what I call that reaching energy, which is really more of a desperate energy. Impressions will become much more elusive during these times. So it's difficult. You want to set the intention that you get names, but you want to release expectation at the same time. That is part of the art of mediumship, and it's also part of the art of allowing yourself to get names again. I remember when a name was coming through quite fuzzy, and I waited to say it, but then it came through several times. And I said, listen, I've heard Jerry a lot of times, and this seems to be someone that your father is talking about who feels as if they would be deceased right now, and a friend. I got no over and over again, but he wouldn't stop saying Jerry, so I kept sharing it. After the reading a few weeks later, I got an email from this person saying that she'd finally had a conversation with a family member, and that indeed Jerry was a friend of her father's who had also passed. And when you bring a name across, you can say, this may be the name of the spirit that I'm speaking to, or it may be the name of someone else past or living, so that your sitter doesn't get confused and think that that name can only apply to the spirit that you're talking to. If you were getting names and then you stopped getting names, don't panic. It doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean that spirit is taking away your skills. When I first began my mediumship journey, I got names constantly. I was very excited about it. And then for more than a year and a half, I got not a single name. What I've realized over time is that this is most likely due to a development cycle. And mediums go through development cycles where spirit's working with us behind the scenes. We may not even be aware of it. And they're helping us develop new tools for our toolbox. Sometimes that means, for whatever reason, that some of the tools we've been leaning on go away. Now, I can't say that I understand exactly why this is, but my interpretation of it is that sometimes spirit will have certain skills leave you for a while so that you're more apt to build new ones. And then those skills return. I indeed get names again. So this can come back. Don't fear. Some of us have certain pieces of evidence come to us more easily just due to our frame of reference. But it's my belief that any kind of evidence you truly desire to bring through for the right reasons, and if you work on them, will become available to you. If you're interested in strengthening your clairs so that you can speak to spirit, download my free guide. It's called 3 Easy Exercises to Strengthen Your Clairs and Speak to Spirit, including sitting in the power meditations to help you develop your mediumistic skills. The link to download that free training is below in my video description. If you're interested in working with me, there's a couple ways that you can do that. Head to my website, www.mediumshipwithmel.com. There you can check out my Mediumship Development Circle that I run 3 times a year. You can check out my course, Speaking with Spirits. That's all the A to Z's of mediumship. It happens every year in the fall. And you can even check out my business mentorship program for spiritual mediums called the Profitable Spiritual Medium, that takes you through the A to Z of how to make a living doing this incredible work. Make sure to check out this video next. And if you like this video, comment below, give it a like, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to be notified the next time that I release a new video about all things mediumship.